Ever seen a man get fired in front of the whole company and walk out with half the team behind him? Stay with me. This story takes turns you won't expect. If you enjoy sharp real-life drama, tap subscribe. All right, let's get into it. Graham burst into the boardroom like he owned the air in the place. Mid-slide, right as I was walking the room through a 41% drop in patient wait times across our clinic network, he slammed his palm on the table so hard every cup jumped. 10 minutes to get your junk off this table and out of my company, he barked. For half a second, I thought maybe he was talking to someone else. I was standing there with the clicker in my hand, mid-presentation, in front of half the ops leadership and a board observer. My slide showed more green arrows than a Wall Street rally. 10 minutes starts now, Alden, Graham said, checking his watch like he was officiating a boxing match. His voice was loud enough the open floor outside turned to stare through the glass wall. I set the clicker down gently. "Thank you, Graham," I said, voice steady. My hands moved slower than I felt inside. Someone, probably Sable, had already set a cardboard box on a chair behind me. I started loading it with folders, process maps, my notebook. Sable was in my seat at the far end of the table, legs crossed, flipping through my team's metrics like they were yesterday's news. She didn't even try to hide the smirk, like she was already picturing her name on my office door. Across from her, Miles Reddick and Harold Chu were scribbling numbers, doing quiet math. I caught the second Harold remembered the humiliation clause in my contract. His eyes cut to Claudia, who froze, lips tight like she bit into something frozen solid. Graham kept going. 8 minutes. Then, 7. Like we were in a halftime show. He wanted a scene, wanted me to break down, snap, curse, something. Instead, I peeled a strip of duct tape off the underside of the table, where I'd hidden a USB drive months ago and pocketed it. Never trust an Armitage with your systems. Outside the glass, Rowan stood up from his desk on the ops floor. Then Davika, then Dorian, then Janelle, then the Vale twins. One by one, my people got up. No words, just stood. By the time Cal and Reese from security showed up, I had a quiet wall of 27 behind them. Cal said, "Standard procedure, Mr. Rourke." I nodded, picked up my box. I walked past Graham without looking at him. The room was dead silent. I hit the door, and behind me I heard chairs squeak, bags zip. Those same 27 people fell in behind me. At reception, Nomi's eyes were wide. Cal leaned in close. "For what it's worth, Alden," he muttered. "In 15 years, I've never seen anyone walk out like this." I said, "Yeah, let me tell you how we got here." Before listening, share which city or country you're watching from, and let's continue. 5 weeks earlier, I was climbing the stone steps of the Armitage house with a tray of ribs in my hands, the kind my mom used to make when money was tight but pride was high. I didn't need to glance left to know that Graham's car was already in the family-only spot up front. I saw it the second I turned onto their street. I just kept walking. Inside, everything smelled like polish and power. Maris greeted me with her usual cold lotion hug and a compliment about my shirt that didn't sound like one. The table was already set with linen napkins and place cards like it was Thanksgiving, and not just another Sunday where Graham got to remind me whose last name mattered in this house. Dinner started the way it always did, with a toast. Graham lifted his glass before I'd even sat down. "To another record quarter at Vertex Health," he boomed, hand clamped around Lena's shoulder like he was posing her for a stock photo. "To the Armitage name, to bloodlines that build empires." I took my seat at the far end and let the words slide over me. When I brought up that we'd saved a manufacturing client's on-site clinic from a shutdown on Thursday, worked around the clock to do it, he didn't even blink, just waved a hand and said, "That's what people like you are paid for, son. A good ops guy is invisible when he's doing it right." Lena laughed like it was the line of the night. I didn't. My hands were still cracked from moving supply crates myself because 2 of our drivers were out sick. Graham wasn't done. "You know," he said, fork in hand, "men in leadership never look tired. It's all about projection." Maris leaned in, rested her soft hand on mine. "You should watch that, dear. A man in your position can't afford to look worn down. Investors smell doubt on your face." I'd been up 32 hours straight before that dinner, managing a crisis clinic that had almost tipped into legal territory. But sure, maybe if I'd smiled more while doing it, Graham would have given me a cookie. Sable arrived late, all lip gloss and timing, and slipped into the seat to Graham's right like it had her initials on it. "Apologies," she said. "Last-minute call with the Florida group." Graham beamed at her and introduced her to a board guest as our rising star in strategic initiatives. No mention that she reported to me. No hint I even existed in her chain of command. Later, between bites of overpriced roast chicken, She leaned toward me and said, sweet as sugar, "How do you stay so calm when a clinic's on fire, Alden?" I should have ignored it, but I answered. I gave her a real explanation about triage protocols and team leadership because I still believed we were on the same side. I didn't realize she was writing the script for my exit. After dinner, while Graham whispered legacy plans into Lena's ear like he was crowning a successor, Maris walked me to the door and slipped her hand through my arm. "Sometimes it's easier to keep the peace than to be right," she said, eyes soft. I gave a nod I didn't feel. On the drive home, Lena turned down the radio. "You looked grim at the table," she said. "Dad's under pressure too, you know." I changed lanes and clenched the wheel tighter. I wanted to say pressure feels different when you hold the sword, but I didn't. That next Tuesday morning, I stood at the kitchen counter watching Lena grind beans into a chrome machine that cost more than my first car. She was barefoot in one of her silk robes, scrolling her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. "You think Dad's going to bump you up to COO after this quarter?" she asked, not even looking up. I kept my eyes on the toast. "I'm more focused on keeping our clinics from drowning in wait times." She snorted. "He's really impressed with Sable's fresh thinking, her energy. He said she's bringing a new spark to the ops side." Fresh thinking. Energy. I'd never once heard Graham use words like that about me. I just nodded. Didn't say what I was really thinking. That Sable had walked in with a smirk and a shortcut for everything, and Graham was eating it up. At HQ, he told me he wanted me to mentor her. His word, not mine. So I did what I was asked. I walked her through the seasonal rerouting protocols we use during flu season, how we triage when a clinic loses a provider without notice, how to get a new employer site up without triggering nurse burnout. I answered every question, held nothing back. I still believed, stupidly, that this was about team growth, but her questions shifted fast. She started asking who had final say on emergency schedule changes, who approved comped visits, where the data lived for both clinics and clients on the new vendor platform. She wrote things down like she was in training, not shadowing, training. Late Thursday, I swung by the copier room and froze. There was a printout from our restricted clinic utilization report sitting in the tray. My initials were on the margins, but I hadn't printed them. She had. Her handwriting was all over it. I brought it to her. "How'd you pull these?" I asked. She didn't even blink. Just smiled and said, "Graham told it to give me whatever you have." Something dropped in my gut, cold and heavy. I nodded once and walked away. Then came the real fire. Friday night, our vendor platform went down mid-upgrade, and the backup servers started feeding corrupted patient data. Thousands of appointments on the line, and we had 12 hours to cut over the entire system to the new provider. Rowan showed up first, still wearing the wristband from Ivy's school band concert. He glanced at her photo on his phone, then locked eyes with me and got to work. Devika joined on speaker, telling her husband their anniversary weekend was off, then opened 3 clinic dashboards like she hadn't missed a beat. Dorian brought cold brew from Noah's Cafe and turned the conference room into a war room. The Vale twins pulled whiteboards out of closets and started sketching triage scenarios like it was a final exam. Janelle built a client call list in under 20 minutes and had someone on the phone with every major account by midnight. We worked like our jobs, like real people's care, depended on it. Because it did. We rebuilt patient flow manually, validated consent flags, checked allergy alerts line by line so nobody got the wrong meds because we were tired. At 5:30 in the morning, I signed off the last clinic. I looked around the room and saw tired eyes, coffee cups, laptops, and people who didn't complain once. Nobody from leadership stopped by, not even a text from Graham. The next day, he sent a 3-line email. "Good job, team. Strong handoff to the new platform. Excited to see how fresh leadership takes us even further." Sable was CC'd. I wasn't mentioned. That night, still wired from 0 sleep and 2 gallons of bad coffee, I opened my laptop in the guest room and registered a Shell LLC, Phoenix Care. I bought the domain on my personal card and saved the receipt in a hidden folder. Then I sat there staring at the screen, hands still twitchy, feeling like a traitor for even considering walking away. But I didn't close the tab. 2 nights later, I was sitting at the dining table with clinic reports from Harlow spread out in front of me. I had half a sandwich in one hand and a red pen in the other when my laptop dinged with a new email. The subject line was vague, just "follow up Harlow," but the sender was Sable. I clicked, thinking maybe it was an updated stat or a billing issue. Instead, I read a message that wasn't meant for me. My name was in the to field by mistake, probably a tired autopilot slip, but it was clearly written for Graham. She said she'd personally stabilized the Harlow Clinic situation, claimed my leadership had been shaky lately, said I'd been coming in looking worn down, and suggested refreshing the department with someone who projects more confidence. I read it again, then again. My jaw locked so hard my teeth ached. That situation she was talking about was the night I slept on a plastic chair in the urgent care staff room, rotating shifts with Rowan and Nomi to keep the night crew alive after half the nurses dropped with flu symptoms. We'd kept the place open on grit and fumes. I didn't think. I just hit forward, sent the email to my personal account, saved it as a PDF, and dropped it into a folder on the Phoenix Care drive. My hands moved before my brain could even argue. Out on the porch, I called Devika and asked about a compliance clause, just to have an excuse. She didn't need much prompting. "She's been showing off your playbooks in meetings like she wrote them," she said. "Keeps calling them her initiatives. She doesn't even understand half the terms she's throwing around." The next morning, Claudia caught me outside the boardroom and asked, "Is your contract in a safe place?" Her voice was low, careful. "You might want to revisit the part about public disparagement," she added, tapping her folder. "Graham skimmed that clause, but legal didn't." At almost the same time, Nomi pulled me aside at the front desk. She looked nervous, eyes darting like someone might hear us. "I saw Sable in Harold's office yesterday," she whispered. "There were salary printouts. Your name was crossed out in red ink. Feels wrong, Mr. Rourke." Smelled wrong when she smiled. I didn't say much, just nodded, thanked her, and walked back to my desk with a slow-burning chill crawling up my back. That night, I opened the Phoenix Care file and stopped pretending it was just a placeholder. I rewrote the sketch. This wasn't going to be consulting anymore. It was going to be a full platform, a system for clinics drowning in their own chaos, something they could plug into when their internal leadership, their tech, their trust in headquarters had failed. A clean slate, built from real fieldwork, not boardroom PowerPoints. Lena walked past my notebook as I was drafting the framework. She saw Phoenix Care scrawled across the top of the page and laughed like I'd just joined a fantasy football league. "Just don't let Dad hear your daydreaming," she said, kissing my head before drifting back toward the TV room. I stared at the page after she left. The silence in that house wrapped tight around me. No voices, no music. Just the hum of the fridge and the creak of old wood under my chair. For the first time since I married into this family, I felt it in my bones. I was completely on my own in that house. The morning it all blew up, I badged into HQ at 6:40 a.m., like I always did. Cal was posted by the side doors, but he barely glanced at me. No morning nod, no small talk. Just eyes forward. That was the first crack in the glass. The elevator ride up to Ops was dead quiet. No clipboard checkers, no usual clatter of carts or printouts, just the hum of the lights and the sound of my own heartbeat getting louder with every floor. The big conference room was already lit when I stepped in. Sable was in my chair. Not just near it, dead center, leaned back like it had always been hers. Her laptop screen was open to two of our most sensitive dashboards: employer contracts, clinic performance metrics, files she should never be able to access without my credentials. I asked her straight, "How'd you pull those?" She didn't even pause. "Graham gave me full admin while we transition," she said, casual like she was talking about a new phone plan. The word transition hit like a slap. My hands tightened around the folder I was holding, but I didn't say anything. Just walked around her and opened my own laptop. People started coming in, but wrong. Out of order. Wrong tempo. Harold hugged his tablet to his chest like it might save him. Miles came in with a legal pad. No dumb jokes like he usually tossed my way. Then Leland Frost from the board walked in and sat down like he had every right to be there, just observing, which always means someone's head is on the chopping block. I started anyway. Clicked through the numbers, readmission rates down, no-show rates slashed, patient survey scores climbing quarter over quarter. I kept my voice even, but the room was shifting. Not because the numbers were bad, because they already knew what was coming. I was the only one still playing it straight. Midway through a slide on the vendor integration rollout, the door slammed open. Graham stormed in, tie crooked, jaw locked. He didn't look at the screen once. "You've got 10 minutes to clear your things from this table and leave Vertex Health for good." That was it. That was the moment. My grip on the clicker didn't even flinch. Claudia's pen stopped moving. Her eyes jumped to the contract folder beside me. Harold glanced at Miles and mouthed something. Probably a number. Probably the clause Claudia warned me about. I set the clicker down and said, "Thank you," calm as a Sunday. Then I opened my folder, started stacking the reports, my personal notebook with 3 years of handwritten notes, the team photo from our last clinic launch. The box was already there, on a chair, like they'd planned the whole thing down to the props. Through the glass, I saw Rowan stand up, then Davika, Dorian, Janelle. The Vale twins moved at the same time, synchronized like swimmers, chairs scraped back all across the floor, quiet but steady. 27 people stood without a word. Graham kept calling out the countdown. 9 minutes, 8, 7. But his voice was thinning out, going hollow. He finally turned and saw them, the whole crew, silent, standing, eyes on me, not on him. I lifted the box, nodded to no one in particular, walked past Graham without breaking stride. At the elevators, Cal and Reese were already waiting. Cal's eyes met mine and stayed there. "Protocol," he said, tapping the radio on his shoulder like punctuation. Reese looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. I didn't blame him. We rode down in silence. In the lobby, Otis stood mid-mop like the world had stopped moving. He didn't say a word. Just gave me a nod. Sharp, deliberate. I walked through those glass doors and didn't look back. The drive home took exactly 19 minutes. I know because I didn't take my eyes off the dash clock once, didn't answer a single call. They stacked up on the screen. Blocked numbers, Claudia, Finch, half my team. I let them pile. Lena's car was already in the driveway. I hadn't even touched the front door key before it opened, and she stood there, arms crossed, eyes tight, like she'd been standing in that spot rehearsing. "Dad called," she said before I could step inside. "He said you lost it. Said you yelled at him in front of the board and security had to drag you out." I set the box down just inside the door, pulled out my phone, and walked her through what actually happened in 3 short sentences. Then I opened Sable's missent email and handed it to her. She didn't say anything for a long moment, just scanned the screen twice. I watched her jaw twitch at the word unsteady, saw her blink harder at replacement. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat. "You should have told me. Dad says you've been on edge for months. He's worried about your judgment. I don't know what to believe right now." I looked straight at her. "So do you believe him or me?" She didn't answer, just grabbed her purse and keys off the hook and said, "I need space to think. I'm going to stay at my parents' for a little while." The door clicked shut behind her like the end of a chapter. I stood there in the kitchen with a cardboard box full of 9 years of work and felt something inside me go still, not break, harden. My phone lit up again. This time it was Claudia, voice low, like she was calling from a closet. "I'm in an empty exam room on 16, she whispered. "Listen, I looked at your contract again. The public humiliation clause is airtight. You've got leverage, Alden. Based on last year's numbers, I'm estimating mid-6 figures, maybe more. You sitting down?" I was now. Right after we hung up, Finch pinged me. Screenshots from a group chat he started called Exodus, already full of names I recognized. Nurses, schedulers, analysts, people asking what happened, who was next, if I was starting something new. 10 minutes later, an email from Teresa Vaughn dropped into my inbox. Subject, your walkout. Body. Your team walking out tells me everything I need to know. If you're building anything, I want first look. I stared at that line for a solid minute before the doorbell rang. It was just past 9. Maris stood on the porch in flats and a cardigan, holding a thick folder like it had teeth. She didn't wait for me to speak. "Can I come in?" she asked, quiet. "Graham doesn't know I'm here." We sat on the couch. She didn't look like herself, hair pulled back tight, hands clenched in her lap. Then she opened the folder. Inside were copies of old board minutes, red-lined emails, notes from closed sessions. She laid out everything. Graham firing his own brother Eamon, then Corinne Slater from marketing, then Victor Lau from innovation. One by one, the same pattern. Public, brutal, clean hands in writing, dirty ones behind the scenes. "I watched him do this to Eamon over a golf membership," she said. "And to Victor for calling out a broken rollout in front of the wrong VP. I've kept my mouth shut for years, but I won't do it again, not after today." I sat forward, hands on my knees, staring at the stack. "You're not alone in this," she added. "Not anymore." At 2 in the morning, my phone lit up on the nightstand and jolted me out of a dead sleep. Claudia's voice was tight, almost whispering. "I'm in the 3rd floor restroom," she said. "Lock the door. You need to hear this." I sat up, heart pounding. She didn't waste time. Sable pushed an update through the new platform without telling anyone. Didn't follow protocol. Didn't contact your team. Didn't loop in the vendor. She downloaded some garbage patch tool off the internet and ran it herself. I closed my eyes, bracing. She nuked half the system, Alden. Clinics are pulling up blank charts. Or worse, wrong charts. Employers can't access records. Front desks are canceling hundreds of visits because nobody can see who's supposed to be where. I rubbed my temples, already knowing the damage wasn't going to be measured in tickets or downtime. This was the kind of damage people would remember for years. 2 days later, Harold slid into a diner booth across from me and ordered a coffee, like we weren't standing ankle-deep in corporate blood. Early numbers say 62 million, he said, voice low. Not including lawsuits, not including the accounts walking out. I raised an eyebrow. Graham threw a monitor, he added. At a wall, not at someone. Small miracle. The next morning, Lena showed up at my door with puffy eyes and a stack of printed forms clipped together. She didn't sit down. Dad wants to resolve this quietly, she said. There's a generous package, NDA and non-compete. It lets you walk away and rebuild somewhere else. He gets to retire with dignity. I stared at her. And what do I get? I asked. After he counted down my firing like it was a halftime show? She opened her mouth, then shut it. I stepped forward. Do you even realize what you're asking? You want me to sign a paper saying I'll help cover for the man who handed Sable the admin access that just wiped out the system? You're being selfish, she snapped. Men in your position have to put the family's image first. Something in me split clean down the middle. I didn't yell. I just looked her in the eye and said, if you want to stand with your father, you can stay there. She left without another word. By early afternoon, my house stopped being quiet. Rowan walked in first, Ivy's math workbook tucked under his arm. Devika followed, juggling 3 laptops and a charger bag. Dorian showed up next with a carrier full of Noah's coffee, and the Vale twins came in already arguing about infrastructure diagrams. Janelle called in from a client site. Finch fired up a new group chat. Phoenix Care, Day 1. We shoved the couch against the wall and unrolled butcher paper like we were back in a startup garage. Rowan drew a column titled Clinic Allies. Devika listed vendor contacts she trusted. The Vale twins started sketching a platform we could actually scale without politics slowing it down. Teresa flew in straight from Denver, walked the halls of my half-packed house with a notebook in hand and no small talk. She asked 5 hard questions about liability, team control, growth limits. Then she snapped the notebook shut. I'm in. You find space. You show up full time. I'll back it. Rowan tucked Ivy at the dining table with a tablet and leaned over to me on the way back. I want her to see this, he said. I want her to grow up knowing men don't have to eat dirt just to keep a job. That hit harder than anything Graham had said in a year. By the time the sun dipped, we had a rough partnership agreement signed, the name Phoenix Care finalized, and a plan to meet the next morning at an old warehouse Teresa's contact found 2 exits south. The warehouse smelled like oil and old dust, but to us it was clean air. It felt like the first real breath any of us had taken in years. We dragged in folding tables, plugged in borrowed monitors, and called it headquarters. Noah hauled in a coffee station he built out of an old workbench. Otis showed up one morning with a toolbox and didn't ask if we needed help. He just started rewiring light fixtures. 2 days in, Teresa brought Sabine Adler, CEO of one of the biggest health tech players in the country. They walked the floor with clipboards, drilling us on redundancy plans, onboarding timelines, clinic cutovers. When Devika and I answered at the same time, down to the order of which screens go dark first and what backup plan kicks in, Sabine nodded. Good, she said. I'd rather trust operators than showmen. At lunch one day, Claudia passed me a plain folder under the table like we were in a spy movie. Inside was audio from a Vertex board call. Leland Frost's voice came through first, clean and brutal. Graham's stunt with Alden, plus the platform incident, has put us at risk of forced sale, he said. I listened to the full thing later that night, sitting alone at the warehouse, lights off. Board members spelling out in clipped tones how Graham's temper had cost them everything. One even referenced my humiliation clause like it was a ticking meter. We scheduled a settlement meeting downtown. But before that happened, Phoenix Care signed its first 3 deals. Harlow Manufacturing was first. No surprise. Patterson Foods came next. Then Colin Harlow introduced us to a mid-size hospital group that had been quietly looking to cut ties with Vertex. They all said the same thing in different words. We're following the people, not the logo. Graham tried to spin the narrative with a press conference. He sat under hot lights and called it strategic restructuring. At that exact hour, Teresa set up 2 cameras in our warehouse. I stood in front of a flimsy Phoenix Care banner with coffee stains on the corner and explained, plain and simple, why 27 people walked out that morning. Because we were done with politics. Because patients don't care what your last name is. They care whether the front desk can find their file. A local news station ran the footage split screen. Graham, sweating. Sable next to him, glued to her phone. Then us. Me in my regular blazer, Davika behind me, the Vale twins adjusting the banner, Otis off to the side with his arms crossed and eyes sharp. That night, Sable called me. Unknown number. Her voice was hoarse. "I didn't start out trying to push you out," she said. "I grew up broke. My mom's medical debt wiped out everything. Graham offered me a way up. I took it. I didn't know how to stop. I didn't sugarcoat it. Taking credit is one thing. Taking responsibility is another," I said. "I won't lie for you. I won't fake a recommendation. But I hope you figure it out before you wreck your next job, too," she cried, then hung up. A week later, I met Maris at a lawyer's office not far from the warehouse. She slid a folder across the table, divorce papers, sale receipts, and a personal check to Phoenix Care that made me pause mid-breath. "Call it restitution," she said. "For the years I looked away, I'd rather back you than keep pretending his name means anything anymore." Meanwhile, Nomi stayed at Vertex for her son's insurance. But she kept the quiet current flowing, texted Claudia and Cal when Graham started lashing out at middle managers. Then one night, she handed off a thumb drive Cal had prepped. Hallway footage, boardroom angles, audio. "Just in case," her message said. "For when someone tries to say you exaggerated." The hotel conference room smelled like burned coffee and recycled air, the kind of place where deals get signed with clenched teeth. For the first time in 9 years, Graham walked into a room I was already sitting in. He looked smaller without the Vertex logo behind him, suit loose at the shoulders, hair more gray than I remembered. He didn't look at me. His lawyer, Julian Marks, handled the talking, one of those old-school firm types who thought charm meant not blinking while delivering an insult. Julian slid the offer across the table. It already matched what Claudia said we could win if we dragged this into court, probably more once you factored in bad press and board pressure. But I wasn't here for just a number. "We want 3 things," Claudia said, calm and clear. "Written admission that the termination was mishandled, non-disparagement running both ways, full release from the non-compete." Julian looked annoyed. Graham still hadn't spoken, but after 5 seconds of silence, he reached for the pen and signed. Watching him scribble his name under those terms felt sharper than any check. While Julian zipped up his briefcase, Claudia reached into her own and pulled out a separate folder. Quiet, steady, no drama. "These are copies of internal complaints, settlement memos, and recorded calls," she said. "The board voted this morning. Graham will be removed as CEO before end of quarter." Julian didn't argue, just took the folder and nodded once. Later that week, Cal sent me a grainy security cam clip from HQ. Graham was alone in what used to be my office, staring at the whiteboard. He said it twice, just loud enough for the mic to pick it up. 10 minutes, 10 minutes. Cal said he stood there for almost an hour, talking to no one. Back at home, another stack of papers waited for me. Lena's handwriting was on the note tucked into the envelope. "She's been in therapy," it read, "and needs to build a life not defined by you or her father." I signed. Because whatever marriage she was still chasing, I wasn't in it anymore. A few days later, my dad called from Indiana. He'd caught a Phoenix Care segment on late-night cable, said, "So you're the guy who walked 27 people out of a job, huh?" Then he went quiet. "I'm proud you didn't bow your head," he added. That landed harder than I expected. Nomi messaged that she'd been let go in the second wave after the Vertex board announced the sale talks. We brought her on at Phoenix Care before the week was out. Better role, better insurance for her kid, and the front desk ran smoother within 2 days of her first shift. Rowan got his custody agreement adjusted. The judge liked that he had a stable role at a growing firm. Ivy started spending more afternoons at the warehouse, doing homework at a little table we set up between Dorian's screens and the fridge stocked with juice boxes. When the Vertex sale hit the news, I barely reacted. Just another headline in another healthcare roundup. For Harold and Miles, it was relief. For Graham, it was the end of the only story he'd ever known how to tell. A few weeks later, I was driving to a client site, windshield cracked, cup of gas station coffee going cold in the cup holder. I passed a strip mall 2 exits off the highway. Second floor, beige door. A plastic sign read, Armitage Advisory Group, Business Consulting. I didn't slow down, didn't even glance twice, just kept driving. A year and a half after the firing, the warehouse barely resembled the place we started in. The flickering lights were gone, replaced with clean LEDs. The floors had epoxy coating now, and someone painted a bright mural in the break room without asking. We left it. There was a corner with beanbags and a Lego bin for the kids of staff who swung by after school. We had just over 70 people on payroll. Schedulers, clinic flow specialists, compliance officers, and a couple of tough-as-nails nurse managers who'd walked away from hospital politics but not from patients. I still knew every name, every backstory, every clinic they'd helped pull out of chaos. Phoenix Care ran operations for 3 full regional clinic networks and 5 large employer programs. My calendar stayed packed with wait time reports, issue logs, and renewal calls. The kind of stuff that used to wear me out. Now it came with a different weight: hours, our decisions, our systems, our rules. Rowan joked our weekly stand-up felt more like a union meeting than a leadership huddle. Ivy rolled her eyes and asked if she could shadow Devika for a school paper on how systems actually keep people alive. She brought us cookies that week, the good kind. Claudia owned the chief legal officer title like she was born with it. Every once in a while, she'd mention another recruiter sniffing around Graham and say, "Don't worry, they Googled him," with that dry little smile that reminded me her file drawer still had bite. Maris stopped in now and then, usually with community health grant updates and a new haircut. She called herself semi-retired, said she'd rather fund things that matter than sit next to women who pretend not to know what their husbands are ruining. On slow nights, I'd sit out on the loading dock with Otis, watching the parking lot thin out. He'd sip his coffee and say stuff like, "Boss, you changed how people around here think about getting fired." I'd just nod and say, "I didn't change anything. I just walked when a man told me to crawl." Every couple of months, someone sent me a link to one of Graham's blog posts on leadership. 3 likes, a grainy photo of him in a strip mall suit. I never replied. The real payback isn't what he lost. It's what we built. It's hearing a nurse say her clinic feels human again. It's a factory worker telling me his appointment actually starts on time. When I think about that boardroom, I don't see Graham. I see Cal dropping his hand from my arm. I see 27 people standing without being asked. I hear our footsteps, steady, deliberate, heading for the elevator. I used to think being a man meant keeping your head down and being thankful. Now I tell anyone who will listen, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is pick up your box and walk. As you're sitting with this, let me ask you straight. Would you take your box and walk? If you've got hype, tap it, please subscribe and like, and drop a comment.